one more. Apparently my counting skills aren't. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Great this morning. That's a good sense. It's coming. Ready for that?
I was going to say that.
I'm trying to make sense. Let's see. Okay. All right, so our tea this morning is Skullcap. This is, so we have common names of plants, and then we also have the Latin names. Scutellaria is the genus, and then Lateriflora is the species. So when we talk about plants, it's really important to know the botanical names of plants, particularly because there's another plant with the common name of pink skullcap, and it looks very much like it. It is not in this genus. It's not a Scutellaria. It's what's called a teucrium, and its other common name is germander. And there's a long history of adulteration of skullcap with pink skullcap with germander. And the problem is that germander is damaging to the liver. It's liver toxic. And so it looks similar to it. It grows in similar areas. It has a pink flower instead of a purple flower, but otherwise it's very similar. So it's not enough to know the common name oftentimes, right? Also, this common name, it's common to Western traditional medicine, but there are other traditional medicine modalities all over the world. Lots of people use skullcap plants, and they don't always use this name. So this is the name that I know it as, but y'all may know it as different names. And so for all of us to kind of understand that we're all talking about the same plant, we always want to go to the botanical name. In Chinese herbalism, there's another skullcap that is used, and that's Scutellaria biacalensis. And there they only use that species of plant. And they use a completely different part of the plant. They use the root. We're using the leaves and flowers. And the action is totally different. So sometimes even if you're getting like a skullcap and you're getting the genus, the right genus, you might be getting a different species in a different plant part. Very, very complex sometimes when you're working with plants. Hi. And sometimes we'll just say, you know, everything in the Scutellaria genus is fine. You just go ahead and use it. It's all going to be fine. I need you. Oh, thank you very much. You're so welcome. Then we can like scoot and make or up in front if you want to kind of set things. No, you don't have to be out there. Okay. So we are working with skullcap, sometimes called mad dog skullcap because of its historical usage. We'll talk about that. So, and then it's also sometimes helpful to know the family name, right? So we have the genus and the species, but bigger than that, we have the family. And so this family, this is the mint family, right? So everything in the mint family is all related. Well, all plants are related. I mean, you go back far enough, everything that's living is related. But in the Lamiaceae family, generally we have plants that look and taste and smell like mints. So it's things like rosemary and lavender and thyme and oregano and sage, all of these aromatics, right? But this, you smell any aromatics in there?
Very mild.
Very mild. Yeah, this is one of the few non-aromatic Lamiaceaes. So oftentimes when you see this, you'll think, oh, I know that's going to be kind of a flavorful, aromatic, spicy, warm, right? This is one of the few that doesn't do that. So we would probably not use this plant in steam medicine, right? You could steam with thyme or lavender, mint, right? Because the chemistry of those plants like steam, because it has those little tiny molecules that are carried by steam, largely in those aromatics. But this plant, probably not. There might be other stuff going on, but probably not. Yeah, so that's an important thing to know about a plant. And one of the first ways that we can introduce ourselves is breathe in that steam and see, is there anything in that steam that like changes the way that my tissues feel? Does it open things up? Remembering that steam in itself is medicinal, right? So just breathing in the steam is going to be healing. So it takes a little bit of time of doing this over a little while before you can differentiate what is the steam doing by itself and what is the steam plus the herb doing. And sometimes the herb isn't doing anything because this herb just doesn't really like steam. Steam is not where it wants to do its medicine, right? It wants to be in the water. And that's how I feel with the Skullcap, is that it's going to be more effective if I'm taking it into the body. So then we can take it into our body, and what we want to do is we want to hold it in our mouth for a little bit and just see what you taste, but also see how the tissues of your mouth feel when you have that tea coming in. They're bathing all of the tissues, and we remember that the oh, good morning, Rosa. The mouth, where everything comes into the body, we have a lot of kind of awareness there, so we can sense a lot of information coming in. So I'll shut up, and y'all just kind of sip your tea and see what it says to you. Rosa, do you have any Skullcap to make tea with at home? If not, you can get some later and make some and join us. You can also kind of check in with if there's any part of your body that feels like it's kind of waking up or being affected by the herb, right? Sometimes we can feel it in our digestion, or we can feel like circulation moving to the extremities. We can feel it in our brain or in our heart, or it just makes it feel different. And sometimes not. So how about for you? Do you feel it going anywhere, doing anything? Yeah. It's real for you. Oh, and Rosa's making tea. Good.
It feels cooling.
It feels cooling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And do you feel that, where do you feel that cooling?
I don't know. I'm trying to place it.
Right.
But it just kind of came over me, and I was like, okay, I feel like I'm kind of bringing my temperature down a little bit.
Cool.
But I don't feel it anywhere particular in the body for me right now.
Great.
Yeah,
okay.
very mild.
So it's like all over your body,
Yeah,
more of a
kind of like flowing through.
Yeah. Nice. Lovely. Yeah.
It also feels calming to me.
It feels
I
calming.
mean, even just the smell of it made me kind of feel like relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the smell. It wasn't bitter or anything. It was just
Right.
pleasant in that sense.
So that's pleasant.
Yeah. Yeah.
It smells funky.
Yeah.
When I first smelled it, I was like,
That's so interesting.
That's why we like to do this in a large group, so we can see all the different bodies and how they respond. I'm with you. I think it's just a very mild, just bland, mild. Nothing like in your face, smacking you, or strongly sedating, right? It's not like knocking you out or stimulating. It's just.
I don't think I've ever had it before, too.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I've had it. And it's funny that you mentioned that it's a part of the mint family, because I felt that energy of it,
Mhm.
but I didn't taste the energy of it. Right.
Right.
I knew before we got here, I was like, I feel like it's like minty.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know, it's very interesting.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Nice. And what flavors do you taste?
Dirty socks.
Dirty socks. Wow, your body is really not loving the Skullcap.
It feels so big. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking like chamomile, but maybe that's like way off.
Yeah, it has a bit of a sweetness
Yeah.
to it.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of something I would drink for like my menstrual cycle.
Okay.
Yeah, like a way to bring my body back grounded.
Uh-huh.
Like I'm feeling ramped up.
Right.
Like PMS symptoms or something.
Right. Right. Yeah. Cool. All right.
It's that subtle sweetness.
Mhm.
Is that subtle sweetness? Yeah. Great. All righty. So when we talk about the plants, we talk about their energetics, right? And so one of those is on that spectrum of cooling, a plant that cools you down, a plant that heats you up, right? What's a heating plant? What do you think about?
Like cayenne.
What is it?
Like a cayenne.
Yeah, cayenne. Classic cayenne. Yeah, ginger. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, cayenne, ginger, cinnamon, right? Those are plants that heat us up, warming and stimulating. There's other ways that we can have heat, kind of that feeling of warmth in the body too, right? There's deep nourishment that can feel warming in the body. It's a different thing than a ginger kind of warmth, right? And then plants are cooling to the body. They can cool things down. And there can be different bodies that experience plants differently. Warming, someone feels it as cooling, someone feels it as warming. So what does your body feel with this? You were saying you felt it kind of cooling.
Mhm.
Yeah. And also it can change, right? So you can feel an initial cooling and then a secondary effect of kind of warming and, oh, now I'm kind of feeling something moving, right? So it can kind of change around. Plants are sometimes tricksters and their chemistry is complex and our physiology is complex. There's a whole lot of ways that they can relate to us. So what do you think about that?
I think that makes sense to me because when I first sipped it, I'm like, oh, this feels so relaxing and calming. And then like I start feeling energy in my heart area. It's like something's moving here. And I thought,
Yeah.
you know, like confusing, but
Yeah.
I feel a lot of like, I don't want to say anxiety, but like,
oh,
for me.
Yeah. And is it also, are you feeling it kind of in that chest heart area? Are you feeling it different? Okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel what you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I understand.
Okay. And how about in the fluids moving in your body? Some plants can bring moisture into the body, right? Causing an overall kind of moistening quality of the body. Most plants are drying. Most plants are going to like move fluids out of the body. They're generally, a tea is going to be diuretic, right? It's going to be kind of flushing stuff out. But some plants do hold moisture and encourage moisture kind of coming into the body. And sometimes we can feel that. It can feel moistening, not so much because it has a lot of moisture, but because it's moving the fluids in our bodies, right? That all of the fluids are kind of becoming more equalized. So is there a sense that you're feeling, and that can be a little bit harder to sense than the kind of heating, the spicy warming or cooling. What do you feel with that?
I would say compared to last week with the plantain,
Mm-hmm.
how that mucusy, slimy feeling came.
Right.
I don't feel that with this.
Right.
So I'm gonna say it's a little bit more drying
Right.
in comparison.
Yeah.
For me, I can't tell if it's dry or if it's toned, but I have kind of like a dry feeling. So I'm not sure if that's the fluid or the structure.
Right.
So I get a little mixed up with those.
Right, absolutely. And this is really common. So Josie's talking about inside the mouth, you can feel kind of a little bit of tightness and dryness in your mouth, right? And so that actually speaks to the third area that we look at, which is structural, right? So this is a plant that tends to be more drying. It doesn't have the starchiness that the plantain has or moistening plants. So this is generally going to be a little bit more drying, not extremely drying. And we have that tonifying effect. So this is a plant that has tannins in it and flavonoids, right? And flavonoids, tannins are things that grab onto tissues. They bind to tissues and they make those tissues, they kind of close them down, right? So that when you have, generally you have a lot of moisture in your mouth, but after those tannins come in, they kind of tighten all of the tissues, you don't have as much saliva being produced. Your mouth feels more dry because it's constricted, it's astringed those tissues. Right? Now, a secondary effect from that you might feel also because the mouth doesn't like to be dry, it likes to be moist. So there's a secondary response that the mouth goes, and so that's kind of correcting for that. So we can feel that astringency, and then we can feel after that a reflex response of increased moisture, but there's still that astringency. And that astringency isn't so much a factor of drying the body out. It feels dry here because it's closed those gates that fluids were moving through. But if we think about that quality of closing those gates in other parts of the body, classically, we would think about it in the digestive tract. If you have, this is lovely to talk about first in the morning, diarrhea, right? And so what is one of the common concerns with diarrhea? Dehydration, because you're losing all those fluids. We generally tend to use tannin-rich plants to treat diarrhea in herbalism because they close those gates. They shut the gates of the intestines so that the body isn't losing all of that water, right? It's able to hold it in. And so the effect locally where the liquid comes in contact, and here's why we like to hold it in our mouth, we can feel the tannins affecting the tissues. And we know that anywhere where the tea comes in contact, it's going to astringe those tissues. And it does that all the way throughout the gastrointestinal tract. And it'll probably do that in the skin if we apply it to the skin, if we used it as an eye wash or a sinus wash or anywhere where we felt like we needed to close down those tissues. But the net effect of closing down those tissues in the gut is the body's able to hold on to water. So it would actually have a moistening effect in the body, not because it's moving fluids into the body, but it's stopping fluid loss, right? So it can be confusing, right? To think, does that mean drying or does that mean tonifying? We generally think of that as tonifying. Might also be drying, probably is drying because most herbs are drying, but it can be very beneficial for those people who are. And so we use that also any time we have fluid loss in the body. And so that means for oily skin. Oily skin is fluid moving out, right? And we use astringents, toners, right? We have the same language we apply to skincare. We use toners. We talk about them as closing the pores. They don't actually close the pores. Pores don't work like that. What they do is they astringe the tissues. They bind to the tissues and they make the tissues less permeable. Fluid moves away from them. We use it when we're sweaty. We can use tannins as antiperspirants, right? Because they bind those tissues. You can use them on your hands or your feet. If you get sweaty hands or sweaty feet, you soak them in tannin-rich plants and they're going to stop that sweating. Right, so movement of fluids into and out of the body, the tannins are going to help with. So this is a plant that is generally tonifying to the tissues. It is slightly drying and it is slightly cooling, but it is rather neutral in its effects, which it told us at the very beginning, right? It said, I'm not really doing anything really big here in terms of energetics. But that also means that, kind of like we were talking about with the planting, because it has a broad ranging effect, most bodies are going to respond pretty well to this. Right? You don't have to worry about it being so strongly energetic, too strongly heating, and you have someone who's got overheated already, and you're like, I'd love to give you some skullcap, but you're already really overheated and this is a heating plant and maybe that's not going to work so well with your body. You have to formulate to modify that. No, you can give it to, it's probably going to be fine for most bodies. Yeah. Okay. So skullcap is one of our primary nervous system tropho-restorative. This may be a new word for you, but it's a beloved one for herbalists because we like long words. Tropho-restorative, when we break that down, trophic means something to feed, right? So it feeds and restores. Tropho-restorative, it feeds and restores a system. So whenever we see this word, we know that this is a plant that's taken generally over a period of time to nourish and strengthen some type of system. This doesn't tell us what system, right? We can have plants that are tropho-restorative to the heart, or tropho-restorative to the digestive system, tropho-restorative to the musculoskeletal system. This one is a nervous system, tropho-restorative, nervous system. So generally, if you have something having to do with the nervous system, this is going to be a plant that probably you're going to want to add into your formula. And the nice thing is, so this is also categorized as a nervine, right? Doesn't exactly mean the same thing. So nervine means a plant that works on the nervous system, right? But we can have coffee is a nervine. It works on the nervous system. It's a strong stimulant, but that is a nervous system, right? So we can have stimulating nervines, and we can have relaxant nervines. California poppy is a nervine, and it will make you go to sleep. It's a very strong sedative, right? And then so we have stimulant nervines, we have relaxant nervines, and then we have tonic nervines or tropho-restoratives. So the tonic nervines are the ones that are strengthening and nourishing. That's another word that we use for tropho-restorative is tonic. Same thing. So this is a nervine, a tonic nervine or a tropho-restorative. It does have a calming effect on the nervous system, but it doesn't have a sedating effect, right? So it calms the nervous system down, but it isn't going to make us sleepy. I decided a couple years ago, it wasn't a good idea for me to do sleepy herbs for morning classes. People come in, I did blue vervain once for a class, and yeah, it was funny. I had one woman we were doing the tincture, and she took some. And this was at the old place where I had comfy couches all over. So people would come and just sit in comfy couches. And so I was talking, I could see her kind of, and she's like drinking her tea and she's doing some tincture and she's just kind of slowly going down. And she kept on drinking it. She was going back for more. And I said, I'm intrigued by what's going on here. Can we just stop and talk? She's like, yeah, when I first took it, I got this stimulating effect because it's very bitter. Has anyone tasted blue vervain? It's very bitter. And so that bitterness can kind of make you embody, right? Your body says, whoa, something strong is going on here. You better be present. But then after that, secondary effect is, okay. Right? And so she was trying to get that stimulating effect that she got in the first place. So she kept on taking it, getting this. So it's like, I'm going to make you some rosemary. We'll make you some rosemary and we'll get you back on track. But yeah, so we don't do blue vervain in the morning anymore. But skullcap is a lovely option for us. So we use skullcap anywhere where we're going to be supporting the nervous system in a pretty gentle way. It is a nice plant to use with pain relieving herbs. So it is a support herb. It's going to, whenever you have any kind of a nervine effect, you add a little bit of skullcap and it just potentiates everything. So you're making a sleeping blend, throw some skullcap in there and it'll make the sleeping blend work better. If you make a pain relieving blend, throw some skullcap in there and it's going to be helpful there because it helps to relax the musculoskeletal system. It helps to relax the muscles and it relaxes the nerves, but it doesn't sedate the nervous system. Right? So it's relaxant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Although even chamomile for some people is more kind of too calming. And if you do, a dose, the dose is all the effect, right? So, but you drink a big cup, and I've seen people just laid flat by chamomile tea. Right? We were doing it in class, it's like, oh, because oftentimes I'm like, and here's the tincture, and here's a glycerine, and here's the tea, and here's the essential oil. So I'm throwing chamomile at you. It's like, oh, and here's some growing out there. And yeah, then they're like, okay, I'm just going to go over to the comfy cushion here. I'm just going to rest my eyes for a little bit. We'll get them blinkies and we'll get them in. So skullcap is a great blending herb, although it's wonderful all by itself as well. We like skullcap in particular when the brain is hyperactive. When you have a brain that's just like a da 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 and la 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 and this and this and this and I remember this happened and I'm supposed to do this tomorrow and oh gosh I should have said this to her and this is the next time that happens I'm going to say this and then also I need this is a list of these, right? And it just won't stop. So it's used often for sleep problems where that is a particular problem, right? You're trying to go to sleep at night, but your brain won't shut off. It's a commonly used for insomnia, and for some people, they respond really well to it, and some people don't, because insomnia presents in many different ways, right? So if you have chatty brain insomnia, skullcap and passion flower are two really common ones. But what if you don't? If you have more tension, right? You have a body that's like, my brain is dead. I can't think anywhere, but my body just won't relax. Well, skullcap is going to be helpful for that as well, but you'd want to combine it with something that's going to more specifically help to relax the musculoskeletal system, right? If you have sleep problems because you're in a lot of pain, skullcap will help a little bit, but maybe you need something to address that pain and quiet that down. You might have insomnia due to hormonal imbalances because of menopause, right? So you want to use, there was a great study that just came out on sage. Great study on sage and menopausal symptoms. Salvia officinalis, culinary sage, but you can use pretty much any salvia that's aromatic to work with it. Yeah, but skullcap and sage would be really nice for helping, right? So we can, that's where that combining skullcap with something and then thinking, not treating the imbalance itself, right? We don't treat insomnia. We're always treating a person with insomnia. And what does that person with insomnia look like, right? Because all of us in this room can have insomnia and present in very different ways. And so there's going to be like 6 different formulas because we have 6 different bodies. Right? So, but chances are pretty good you can throw skullcap in that mix and it's going to just make everything work better. There's an herbalist named Seven Song. Rosa, you've asked before about monographs, and I don't know a way to post monographs on YouTube. But if you go to Seven Song's website, everyone should know about Seven Song. He's a great herbalist up in New York. He has a herb school there, and he's just a brilliant herbalist. And he has a monograph that he's written on skullcap. So if you want to read a little bit more, it's a really charming, because he lives in a place where this plant is abundant, where Scutellaria latiflora is the plant that grows in his mountains. And so, he has a lot more experience with it. We have native skullcaps that grow here, but they're tiny little delicate things. They never grow abundantly. I've seen them occasionally like underneath a rock in early spring. There's a little bit of moisture that's held here, and there's tiny little purple flowers, and they're so adorable. I would never harvest that because that's all the skullcap that's in this whole big area. So it's never been available to me as a plant to harvest. But yeah, anyway, in his monograph, he writes a really cool couple of paragraphs. He says, I see it mostly useful for people who constantly need to take charge. They make constant contingency plans and feel personally insulted when things don't go their way. They may have insomnia and can't initially fall asleep due to thinking about all the things they could have done differently that day. They might worry about their performance, about everything. Was the dinner okay? And are expert at criticizing themselves and others. One other place I find skullcap helpful is for people who have an emotional attachment to their injury. This is common. When the person thinks about how they sprained their ankle or got stung, there's an upsetting emotional quality to it. With this type of person, you may see them blaming themselves for the injury. I knew I shouldn't have run that trail. Skullcap may help relieve the physical pain and also some of the emotional pressure that person is putting on themselves. So I love that kind of concept, right? Yes. The more we know a plant, the more we can kind of say, oh, but exactly this type of person is really going to be responsive to that. Yeah. Also, it's like, I am totally that kind of person. So like absolutely speaks to me. Let's see. So it is also really nice to combine with other tropho-restoratives. So if we just feel like we need to nourish our nervous system, and I don't know a single person who does not need to nourish their nervous system, right? This is the world we live in. And we all have different reasons for that nourishment. We all need that deep restoration of the nervous system. And so skullcap can be combined with other plants that are tropho-restoratives. So if we look at some of those blends, we can see some really fun stuff. So if we did skullcap plus milky oats. I know, one of my favorites. So milky oats is cooling and moistening. It's very good for those hot, inflamed, irritated, just reactive, angry, pissed off, right? Angry, pissed off, red-faced people. Milky oats is so calming and cooling. Or those people who have just worked themselves so much, they're just depleted. They're just fried people. Fried, angry, hot, right? All of those kind of hot, dried, irritated, dried people who are just, they have no juiciness to their body, and you can just see them. They're wizened. They don't have fluids, and they don't have any barrier between their nervous system and the rest of the world. So they're just irritated at everything, right? Think of the friction of dryness, right? That friction, that constant irritation of everything is just an irritant to them, and they just want to just slap everything. Those are people who need milky oats. They need that moisture. They need that cooling. They need something to be a barrier between them and the world. They need that juiciness that can cool them down and chill them out. So that combination of skullcap and milky oats is really good for that kind of person. Opposite of that would be skullcap and Damiana. Right? Skullcap and Damiana. Now with Damiana, we have a tropho-restorative, but this is a plant that is is warming. It's warming and drying. And so it's very good for that person who is also depleted, but is just kind of stagnant and cold and dull. They're depressed. They're like mud, right? They're just mud. They don't need moistening and dampness. That isn't going to be helpful for them. They need someone to build a fire underneath them. They need that warmth and that vitality. They need movement in their body. And Damiana is great for that. Damiana is also going to be really good for those people who have shut down their nervous system input, right? They're just kind of not responsive to the world. They're not feeling things. They're not smelling. Their peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is a part of the nervous system that collects information, right? We collect information through touch and sight and all of our sensory stuff, and brings it in, and the brain processes all of that and then sends out, and here's the response that you should have to things, right? So for peripheral nervous system shutdown, Damiana awakens the peripheral nervous system. It increases the sensitivity of the peripheral nervous system, which is one of the reasons why Damiana is so often used as an aphrodisiac. Right? The botanical name of Damiana formerly was Turnera aphrodisiaca, because it is increasing the sensitivity of the peripheral nervous system, right?
Yeah, sexy.
Oh, Damiana, totally. Yeah, it is a sexy plant, aromatic and delicious, a little bit bitter, but spicy and warming. Yeah, but I mean, that doesn't always have to go to sexy time, right? We can take that energy and put that towards, all sorts of other things, right? There's all sorts of other things. We can put that energy towards listening to music, or watching a sunset, or cooking, or all sorts of things, right? So, but that's not going to feel so good. The Damiana by itself, because the skullcap can modify that. But for those people who are hypersensitive to the world, who feel too much, right? There are those people who are just, right? They're just taking everything, and that's not going to be so good for them. That's not going to feel so good. Yeah. I say, please no more. Please, can we just not have more? Right. Yeah. So it's really important to know everyone. And that's important. A lot of people will just say Damiana. Everyone should take Damiana. Right? Yeah, not everyone. I love Damiana, but yeah, not for everyone. So, Milky Oats and Damiana, also a very nice combination. Let's see. And then another one is Tulsi. Right? So Tulsi is a nervous system tropho-restorative that's aromatic. It's a mint-family plant, but it's a basil. Tulsi is also known as holy basil. Tulsi is the Sanskrit name for it, so holy basil. And Tulsi increases clarity and focus, reduces stress responses. It is what we call an adaptogen. So it's a plant that allows us to adapt to things in our environment that we perceive as stress, right? And that's different for all of us. But there are things that happen in your body that reduce your resilience. You just start to feel like, cannot handle one more thing happening to me, not one more. And then that one more thing happens and you just, and you go straight into that sympathetic dominant state, that fight or flight response, right? That fight or flight response is your nervous system, your endocrine system, your brain, your whole body saying, no more of that stuff, no more of anything, we cannot deal with it, right? So plants that are adaptogens can help us to increase that back again. Say, I can deal with a little bit of stuff. I can deal with a little bit more stuff. They just increase our grace, increase our state. And so Tulsi is one of my favorites for that. Having that clarity and focus part of it, and then and just the delicious, delightful flavor, right? So playing around with the formulas. This is one of my favorite things about formulas is looking at duos. Best way to start looking at formulation is, okay, you take one plant, you know that. Now what happens if you mix it with this one? What happens if you mix it with this one? What happens if you mix it with this one, right? That starts you to see how those relationships between the plants happen. And then you're going to be the third person in that relationship, right? Now you're going to have that plant and Milky Oats and your body. What does that relationship look like? It might look good. It might look bad. Sometimes you make a tea formula and you're like, yeah, no. What was I thinking? That's fine, right? Sometimes you as part of the equation also is you're like, what was I thinking? No, right? That's okay. There's plants for everyone. And some of my favorite plants I've introduced people to, and they're like, not loving the hawthorn. It's like, how could you not love hawthorn? It's like, that personally hurts me. I take everything very personally. It's a criticizing me. Yeah. So, Damiana, I'm sorry I didn't need that video. We'll just wipe it down so you don't feel picked on. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, because we have some extra time, the other skullcap. So Baikal skullcap. Oh, wait, I wanted to tell you. So Mad Dog skullcap. You'll see it. That's one of its most common names, called Mad Dog skullcap because of its tradition of use and treatment of rabies.
Oh, wow.
Rabies is a nasty disease. We are really, really grateful that we have vaccines against rabies. Rabies is fatal. Like 100% of the time you will die and you'll have a horrible, painful death with rabies. It's bad. And one of the first things that happens with rabies is spasticity. You go into spasm, severe spasm in the body. And skullcap is a strong antispasmodic. And so it was given before we had, ways of just making sure that people don't get rabies. Skullcap was one of the plants that people would give when you started to have those indications of, rabies. You got bit by a mad dog. Skullcap was a plant that was going to make you comfortable until you died, because rabies is nasty. But anyway, that's how it came by the name Mad Dog skullcap. Baikal skullcap is Scutellaria bicalensis. Yes. Bicalensis. And this is the Chinese herbal skullcap. And this is the one where we use the root. We use the root of the plant. when people have gone and taken the aerial portion, the leaf and the flower of this plant and brewed as a tea, it acts similarly to the skullcap that we're drinking as a tea. So most of the plants in the Scutellaria genus, if it has a Scutellaria name, it's likely, as long as you are using the leaf and flower, it's likely going to be beneficial. So lots of people have different regional skullcaps that grow in their area, and when they use them for tea, it has a skullcap like, it has the effect that this tea has. So that is pretty common. But this one, again, we're using the root. So the Baikal skullcap with the root is used as an anti-inflammatory. It's quite a strong anti-inflammatory in Chinese herbal medicine. So it's often used for injuries, taken internally and also applied topically. But one of the really cool compounds in here, we also talked about in plantain. Because in plantain, there was a compound that we were talking about called bicalein. Bicalein, B-A-I-C-A-L-E-I-N. So named after the plant itself, right? Bicalein is found in Baikal skullcap. It's also found in plantain, and this is the biofilm disruptors. So we were talking about biofilms. Biofilms are combinations of microorganisms that can grow on tissues and cause resistant bacterial or microorganism infections. Resistant infections often have a biofilm component to them. Biofilms adhere to tissues and spread and grow. And as they adhere, you have these multiple organisms. I mean, it's amazing. It's really, really cool. We are in our infancy in learning about biofilms and infectious disease, but it is fascinating. Numerous different organisms working together in creating structures. So you have tissue and you have some organisms that make glue-like compounds that can glue to the tissues. And then you have organisms that make structural things, right? So they can kind of build on there. And then you have organisms that are able to process nutrients for food. So they're there. And then you have these slime producing organisms that produce a slime over the whole thing, so that anything that you're taking, your immune system or herbs or bleach or antibiotics, and it'll just bounce right off, right? So they've all gotten together and they've created this co-op of microorganisms. We generally tend to think that bacteria work by themselves and yeast work by themselves and viruses. No, this is cool. This is what they're doing. And bicalein is able to break down biofilm. Bicalein can go in and break this down so that whatever you're using, whether it's an antibiotic or bleach or usnea or barberry or thyme or oregano, whether it's a medication or an herb, or another chemical, it's going to be able to make it work more effectively. So for chronic infectious conditions, bicalein is a really cool compound, and it's found in Baikal skullcap, but it's also found again in plantain, which is much more abundant as a very common weed. But very, very cool stuff here. It is not antimicrobial in and of itself, but it is going to make antimicrobials work better. Kind of like skullcap makes all of the nervous system stuff work better, right? They're just potentiators. But yeah, so Baikal skullcap is awesome stuff, but the effects of Baikal skullcap are not seen in the foliage, in the tea that we're drinking. We're not getting those compounds. Right. And it's likely that this skullcap does not have bicalein in it. Right.
And bicolein's in the roots?
It's in the roots of the Baikal skullcap.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, of this. We don't use the roots of this plant. It may be that if we use the roots of this plant, it would have very similar effects. but we don't use it. I've never seen it. I think it's fascinating that in Western and Chinese herbalism, there have been these parallel lineages of use of these closely related plants. And we're like, no, we only use the leaf and flowers. No, we only use the roots. And it's only very, very recently that someone thought, I wonder what happens if we use the leaf and flower of this plant. Very recently. The Chinese herbalists were like, that's not what we do. We don't use that. We have a lineage and a tradition. And that's a really important part of Chinese herbalism. I mean, of course, there were people, right, who were drinking skullcap tea and loving it. But there's in the traditional Chinese medicine world, there's a very strong adherence to traditions and ways of using the herbs. And those are not, those, we don't mess with those. People are going to mess with them because people are people and they get to have the relationship with plants they want to. But Chinese herbalism is a monolith, and puts a lot of emphasis there. But yeah, it's fascinating. Let's see. Yeah, so think of it for any kind of spastic conditions. It is antispasmodic, right? So we're going to think of it for spastic conditions where the spasm is in the muscles of the body, in the skeletal muscles, right? So we can have muscle cramps or spasms, tics, the little things that happen. But we can also think of it for smooth muscle constriction. So there's skeletal muscle, which moves our body around. Smooth muscle is a muscle that surrounds organs. So the organs, the stomach, the uterus, the intestines, the bladder, right? What we call the hollow organs. So you have an organ and there's like air or fluid inside there. All of those, the outer tissues are smooth muscle, and that muscle is not under our control. We can't flex that muscle, right? That's under control of the autonomic nervous system, right? The nervous system says, oh, something's happening, we better constrict those tissues, right? Or we better relax them. Oftentimes what caused that is a stress response, right? That same stress response that we were talking about, that sympathetic dominant state, the body is going to constrict tissues when it is responding to stress. And so someone who is under constant stress may have, as an example, other smooth muscle related tissues are the bronchioles leading into the lungs, and also blood vessels, right? And so if you're under chronic stress, you may have your blood vessels constricted all the time. You may have your bronchioles constricted all the time because your body is afraid that there's a monster coming to get you. And if it rips your arm off, you don't want to bleed out. The body is protecting you against something that it perceives as a very real threat. And we just need to kind of tell our bodies, I know, thank you so much for wanting to protect me. And also, there's no monster there, right? But it's hard to say there's no monster there when there are monsters in this world. There's a lot of different monsters in this world. And so it's really hard to tell some people that the world is safe for them because the world isn't safe for lots of people, right? So we can still use plants that can give, again, that little bit of grace, that little bit of resilience to that body. And when we take something that is antispasmodic and we're drinking that and relaxing those bronchioles, relaxing those blood vessels, that can actually inform our nervous system. Oh, look, we're able to kind of relax and take a deep breath, right? We're not shallow breathing like this. We can relax and take that breath. Maybe we can ramp down that stress response a little bit, right? Oh, we're able to get that circulation. We have movement, right? Flow in our body where that wasn't there before because of that constriction. That flow is not a state of stress. Flow is a state of relaxation. So if we can kind of induce that flow, quiet down that chatter, that can have really beneficial effects on our nervous system, on our health, on our immune system, on our cardiovascular system, on blood sugar, on all of the hormonal effects in our body. Those are powerful effects. And they just come through regulation of the nervous system, right? So it's feeling safe is so helpful, so important for us. So Skullcap is just a plant of safety. How are you feeling now with it? Are you
Really calm.
really calm? Yeah.
Yeah, my hip. Mine feels like it's on the ground.
Oh.
It might just be me, but yeah.
I take medication to get my body moving.
Uh-huh.
Because I have hypothyroidism. So
Right.
taking this, I think the initial reaction where I was feeling like almost like an anxiety was my medication and
Right.
the meeting. Because now I do feel like I can fall asleep.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If you have a medication telling your body one thing and the herb is telling yourself, you're like, what am I supposed to be feeling here?
Once I feel like it just kind of sat more calm, and then I was like, okay, I'm not going to finish that.
Yeah. Really good idea. Yeah.
I'm still in flow. I had a very hectic morning,
Mhm.
so I was like a little ramped up, and now I'm here. I'm like, okay, it's not that bad, you know?
Right.
Like, the road was burning, and now it's not.
And now it's not. Burning out there. But in here, we're safe. And the cool thing was you felt that. I mean, with your first sip, you were saying cooling and
Ooh,
calm. And
yeah.
y'all were like, oh, I'm just
Yeah.
feeling that right. The fascinating thing about all of that, all that you were feeling, that kind of agitation and that heart, that cooling, that wasn't due to the full chemistry of the plant entering into your bloodstream and having effects on your nervous system. It couldn't, because it takes time for stuff to enter in your bloodstream and be digested and absorbed, right? So what was that? We don't know. That's really cool. That's the magic of plant medicine. Yeah. We had that vigilance. We had that awareness. We could feel that that certainly is part of it, probably a large part of it. But the complex chemistry of the plant was not in your bloodstream, but y'all felt things anyway, complex and important things. Yeah. Now you're feeling them. Now it's been digested.
Right.
Now it's moving into your body. But and that's also one of the reasons why you can feel something initially, and then sometimes it's going to change because yeah, there's that introduction. We have that with people too, right? You meet someone for the first time, you're like, oh, they're like this, and then you spend an hour with them, like,
Oh,
wow, okay, got that wrong, right? There's just like depths, levels. So yeah, so that is Skullcap.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Can we go over the magical properties of it at all?
Mm.
If there are any?
I'm sure there are. I don't use Skullcap magically. I don't use Skullcap in a magical tradition,
Okay.
because I think that every magical tradition comes from a community or an individual who has built a relationship with that plant. And as we've seen with all of the bodies here, plants don't have the same relationship with all of us. So I think that magical uses of plants generally are very individual. If you're going to be using it magically, you need to develop a relationship with that plant and understand, this is what Skullcap means to me. This is what Skullcap means to me in terms of, how it's making my body feel, how this tissue stability. You can throw the chemistry of the plant in there. Totally throw the chemistry of the plant, because chemistry is part of magic, right? And so, you have that chemistry of relaxation and flow, but also structural support and integrity, right? You have that chemistry of potentiation of everything, adding a little bit of Skullcap and making it just kind of bring out the best of everything that it combines with, right? You have the chemistry of water. It's a plant that likes to grow where there's moisture, right? It's not moist in and of itself, but it grows where there's dampness and moisture, and it proliferates there, right? So what does it say about your relationship with water, with flow, with fluids, right? So I think that's how I use plants magically. Now, of course, we all have different relationships there, and we all have also different lineages. And sometimes it's really important to look at your ancestral work, right? So some people's magical uses of plants is firmly in that ancestral work. Well, that's really important. That has a larger implication than just your own body, right? You're standing on the you're walking the steps that your ancestors walked, or whether it's your ancestors of blood or lineage. But you do want to look at that history, because that is an important part of your practice of magic. All right. So not to say that that isn't also valuable. It's just, what does magic mean to you? Okay. So I never like to really answer what's the magical usage of a plant, because I love to make people ask themselves that.
Okay.
Right? And all that looks like. Yeah. And so again, cannot stress it enough because it pisses me off. There was an herbal conference in Ojai year before last, and they had a person talking about skullcap, and she was a doctor who was studying herbalism, and she was talking about, it was during the pandemic, so everything was online. So I went and I was listening to her talk, and she started talking about how it was hepatotoxic. It was toxic to the liver. It's like, no, stop right now. No. It is not. Teucrium is pink skullcap. Germander is toxic to the liver. Skullcap is not liver toxic. It is not damaging to the liver. Other plants are toxic to the liver. You still see people saying, might be toxic to the liver. It's not. So you will likely see, because I cannot believe that there are still people who are teaching that right now. And I was in the chat. I know exactly. I think there's one with the cat. Yeah, that was me. Yeah. So safe, a very, very safe plant. It is fine for children. It's fine for elders. It does work on the nervous system. And if you're using a plant that works on the nervous system or any of the physiology, be aware that there can be a relationship of course, there's going to be a relationship between any medications that you're taking, other herbs that you're taking. Everything is all about relationship. The world is all about relationship. So what is that relationship going to be like? It might be okay. It might be problematic. You don't know, but you always want to kind of keep in mind what that relationship might look like. And the nice thing about herbs is you can take a sip of the tea, right? You're not jumping into taking a pill or a specific dosage, right?
Yeah.
You can take a sip. You can just smell it. You can, put it on you. You can put it on your pulse points. Put on your pulse points. Rosa's so relaxed, she needs a nap. Rosa, I think we are there with you. So yeah, you can just kind of go slowly into relationship with a plant. You do not need to jump into it all at once. So that's also a valuable part to remember. We have minds that are informed and understandings of herbalism and healing that is informed by our relationship with the dominant medical model. Right? It's just, this is the ocean that we have swum in for most of our lives, most of us. And so we tend to think that when we're dosing with herbs, it's going to be like a medicine. This is the herbal equivalent of this. This is the herb that we use in place of this. Absolutely not. Although, even though that is relationship and it's individual. And also, one more thing, we'll stop with this. We tend to think that medications have a specific effect, a reliable effect. Well, herbs aren't reliable. We don't know. It does all this, but I can take a medication. I know what's going to happen. No, you do not. You 100% do not. Because the same individuality and complexity of bodies and complexity of that chemistry comes into play. There is not certainty with medications. There's not certainty with anything. Embrace that lack of certainty. That's okay. It's scary. It's unsafe. Yeah. But also it's okay.
I want to share a story. So I just did combo like a week or two ago. And going in, I knew, I don't know if you know, do you know combo?
I don't know what I was going to ask you. What.
So it is a medicinal treatment that they use. It's like poison from a monkey tree frog. And
Oh.
So they burn your gateway, your skin.
Okay.
So it can directly impact your lymphatic system.
Okay.
And so I know combo really humbles people because it kind of makes you feel really panicked and it induces vomiting and it can cause a lot of different types of purges. And so
Right.
going in, I was like, there's no promises here. I was like, I fully what's the word? I fully like accept everything that's going to happen. Yeah, I was like, I surrendered to the combo, everything's gonna be fine. And I just went into like a little meditative state and I handled it beautifully with all the purging and stuff. It was wild, but it was fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
KOMBO?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah,
Combo.
very, very interesting stuff. My cousin's a practitioner of it, so
Ooh,
Yeah, he
I
does.
want to.
everything.
Wow.
It was fun. So I have a lot of, I have Lyme disease,
Right.
but I have a lot of ailments in my stomach. So for my purge, my cousin has never seen so much vibrant bile. And
Vibrant bile. You have such vibrant bile. You say that to all the girls. Yeah.
So it was funny because I'm doing a lot of different nutritional healing and
Right.
stuff like that. So just doing my little journey, but it was really fun actually. I was very proud of myself.
Yeah.
Because I was expecting full blown panic, but like the
Sure.
practices I have done, like getting myself in a very calm, like, okay, I surrender myself, this is okay. Just like
Right.
releasing, you feel so good afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's been wild. It was wild. It was awesome.
Also, how lovely to have someone. I mean, it's your cousin.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's an enormously
Yes.
vulnerable space to go into. And
100%.
yeah.
And I'm a person I don't trust a lot, so I was
Yeah.
like, I trust my cousin, be fine.
Yeah.
He was like, do you want to just try like one? And I was like, no, we're doing the full journey.
We're jumping in.
Well, for me.
Yeah.
I know some people do like 7 or way more. Because of my ailments, I started with 3. And he was like, dude, you could have handled 5. And I was like, next time.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
Oh, I
it was
love
really-
that.
It was wild. It was fun.
Nice.
And then my husband did it. He's super healthy. He didn't even purge at all, but he turned beet red and he got like combo face. He's all puffy.
Combo face.
It was wild. It was
I
wild.
love psychedelic medicine.
Wow.
Well, it's non-psychedelic actually. Yeah, it's non-psychedelic. It just it allows your immune system to learn how to heal you. It's non-psychedelic at all, but you feel a lot. You
Yeah.
feel a lot. I was sitting there and for a moment I said, hey, if I feel scared, I'm just gonna touch you and I just want you to put your hand on my back. Like I don't want you to do anything because I need to handle this on my own.
Right.
But it does, it makes you feel like, for me, my experience was panic attack. And so I was like, okay, purge, throw up. All right, I'm good. And yeah, I don't know, it was weird. It was a very fun experience.
That
I like
is
stuff like that.
yeah, a very fun experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friends were like, you're crazy. And I was like, oh no, this is all for a greater purpose.
This is healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Good for you. So cool.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I love that. Okay. No class next week. I will be out of town. So yeah, yes. But we'll be back the week after with St. John's wort because we're going into July. It is St. John's wort season.
My plant is blooming.
Yay! Because yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, I have to tell you. And like, should I use it now? I guess I.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. I'll
Pick the
go
flowers
find-
right now. Start, and it'll continue to bloom. So
Yeah.
pick those flowers, throw them
It's
into
already, I guess.
oil or yeah.
Just like, oh,
You're
my
gonna
God.
get a good bloom.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's-
This bloom this year.
Everything.
I've never seen a bloom like this ever.
Should I pick them and dry them? Oh,
No,
I'll
you
watch
should.
it.
Yeah. I've got
I'll
videos
watch
on
that one,
YouTube, but
yeah.
yeah,
It
no,
was a long
use
time
it
ago, though.
fresh.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah, fresh St. John's wort is only available right now,
Right.
and it is precious
It's
and
illegal, right?
exciting. Yeah.
I got it years ago.
I think it's legal now. I think they've changed because I've seen people selling the plants and the seeds, and it used to be you could not bring plants or
Right.
seeds into California.
It's still considered a noxious weed here.
Yeah, but at least they've not, and understandably so, because it does. It's invasive. It's also problematic for cattle to ingest.
Yeah.
It can cause problems. So yes,
Anyway, awesome.
yeah. But yeah, we'll talk about it.
Enjoy your vacation.
Thank you. I will. See you next week. No, not next week.